During Caesar's campaign through Gaul, battles were only part of the test. Quiet, deliberate sabotage inside his own circle almost unraveled everything. One moment stands out. Early in the campaign, the enemy, the Helvetii, they're on the move, and Caesar's right behind them. And his legions march, the cavalry rides ahead. On the surface, everything looks solid. But then the cracks appear. A small defeat here, missing supply convoy there, promises from allies that suddenly don't come through. To Caesar, these aren't mere logistical hiccups. They're warning signs. In Gaul, the worst threats didn't always wear enemy colors. Sometimes they wore a friend's smile, pledging loyalty in public while plotting in private. So here's the question that haunts Caesar again and again in this campaign. How do you hold power when loyalty is all kind of a theater? What do you do when the real enemy isn't in the battlefield, but across the dinner table? So this wasn't just a test of military strategy. It was a test of control, both political and emotional. It required the kind of judgment that can secure an empire or tear it apart. What Caesar does next shapes the entire rest of the campaign. As you'll see, the hardest choices in war often aren't made in battle. They're made in silence, in between trust and betrayal. Let's get to it. Caesar starts pursuing the Helvetians as they march further from the river. There are some skirmishes. In one of the skirmishes, the Romans' cavalry loses in a little engagement, and the Helvetians get really confident. And it's important to note, throughout this campaign, the Roman cavalry is almost entirely composed of foreign auxiliaries, namely local Gallic allies who have sent contingents of knights along with their horses. So that happened. But as Caesar's going on, harassing the Helvetians, he runs into another problem. He's asked the Aedui, Roman allies, remember, to support the war effort by providing food supplies. And the Romans are getting very low on food, and the Aedui keep coming up with excuses. So Caesar smells something fishy going on here, and he eventually pulls some of the Aedui chief leaders into a council, including the Virgobret of the Aedui, which is their chief annually elected magistrate. And this is an office that is controlled by the famous priestly class of the Gauls, the Druids. More on these interesting people later. Well, so this Virgobret of the Aedui, this magistrate, his name is Liscus this year, and after some cross-examination by Caesar, Liscus breaks down and he admits there are powerful people among the Aedui sowing dissension and making it their goal to prevent the Romans from ever getting any supplies. The Virgobret does not name any names here, but Caesar has his suspicions. So he dismisses everybody but Liscus, the Virgobret, and he basically says, "It's Dumnorix, isn't it?" And Liscus confesses, yes, it's Dumnorix, which is that crafty Aeduan noble who was scheming with Orchestrated way back, with the Helvetii, with the Sequani. And in fact, Caesar finds out Dumnorix was the man responsible for this recent minor defeat of Caesar's Gallic auxiliary cavalry. That turns out was on purpose. They threw the fight, amazingly. But this presents him with another problem. He's found the guy, but, here's what's going on in Caesar's mind. And here's what he's going to do about it. Some more great storytelling here. Quote, Caesar deemed all this to be cause enough for him either to punish Dumnorix himself or to command the state of the Aedui to do so. To all such procedure, however, there was one objection. The knowledge that Diviciacus, the brother of Dumnorix, showed the utmost zeal for the Roman people, the utmost goodwill towards Caesar himself, in loyalty, in justice, in prudence, alike remarkable. For Caesar apprehended that the punishment of Dumnorix might offend the feelings of Diviciacus. So Diviciacus, Dumnorix's brother, he's one of the other Aeduan nobles, and Caesar actually keeps a number of these guys in his camp as, let's call them advisors, and not hostages. But so Diviciacus is actually in his camp, and Diviciacus happens to be a druid. More on the druids in later episodes. So going on here, he summons Diviciacus alone, and he presents the facts before him. And Caesar's like, well, what should I do? Quote, with many tears, Diviciacus embraced Caesar and began to beseech him not to pass too severe a judgment upon his brother. I know, said he, that the reports are true, and no one is more pained thereat than I. For at a time when I had very great influence in my own state and in the rest of Gaul, and he very little by reason of his youth, he owed his rise to me, and now he is using his resources and his strength not only to the diminution of my influence, but almost to my destruction. For all that, I feel the force of brotherly love and public opinion. That is to say, if too severe a fate befalls him at your hands, talking to Caesar, no one, seeing that I hold this place in your friendship, will believe that it has been done without my consent. And this will turn against me the feelings of all Gaul. While he was making this petition at greater length and with tears, Caesar took him by the hand and consoled him, bidding him to end his entreaty and showing that his influence with Caesar was so great that Caesar excused the injury to Rome and the vexation felt by himself in consideration for the goodwill and the entreaties of Diviciacus. Then he summoned Dumnorix to his quarters, and in the presence of his brother he pointed out what he had to blame in him. He set forth what he himself perceived, and the complaints of the state. He warned him to avoid all occasions of suspicion for the future, and said that he excused the past in consideration for his brother Diviciacus. He posted sentinels over Dumnorix, so as to know what he did and with whom he spoke. End quote. There's a great lesson, I think, for someone in power. Sometimes they say what seems like malice is really incompetence, but then very often what seems like incompetence is actually malice of one form or another, and you got to do some sleuthing sometimes to figure out which it is.